What if the darkest part of yourself isn't something outside of you, but something hidden within you, shaping your thoughts, actions, and even your destiny without you realizing it? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, believed that true self-understanding requires us to confront the parts of ourselves we prefer to ignore. He called this hidden aspect of the psyche the shadow. The shadow isn't simply evil or negative, it is the collection of all the qualities, desires, and impulses we deny, suppress, or reject because they don't fit the image we want to show the world. For example, maybe you were taught that anger is bad, so you buried it deep inside. Or perhaps vulnerability made you feel weak, so you locked it away. But what happens to those buried parts? They don't disappear. Instead, they influence our lives from the background, emerging as sudden outbursts, irrational fears, or harsh judgments of others. The shadow is not just darkness, it is also untapped potential, holding the energy we need to become whole. By facing the shadow, we don't just acknowledge our flaws, we reclaim hidden strengths, creativity, and power. Ignoring it leaves us controlled by it, but integrating it allows us to live authentically. Jung's insight was clear: until we face the shadow, we remain incomplete, prisoners of our own denial. Will you dare to face the side of yourself you've been running from? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, believed that the human psyche is not just a surface-level experience of thoughts and feelings, but a vast inner world filled with both light and darkness. Unlike his mentor Sigmund Freud, who emphasized sexuality and early childhood experiences as the root of psychological issues, Jung looked deeper into the symbolic and universal dimensions of the human mind. He believed that to understand ourselves, we must acknowledge not only what we consciously know but also what lies buried in the unconscious, the hidden forces that shape us in ways we often fail to see. Among these hidden forces, Jung identified one of the most powerful and dangerous elements of the psyche: the shadow. The shadow, according to Jung, is the collection of traits, desires, and impulses that we reject or deny because they do not fit the image we want to present to the world. From a young age, society, culture, and family teach us what is acceptable and what is shameful. A child who shows too much anger may be scolded, so he learns to bury his anger. A girl who is too assertive may be told to be quiet or be nice, so she hides her strength. Over time, these rejected parts of ourselves form the shadow, a psychological storehouse of everything we don't want to admit is ours. And yet, despite our denial, the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits in the depths of the unconscious, influencing our behavior in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. Jung's discovery of the shadow was not just theoretical, it was based on his work with patients and his own inner struggles. He observed that people often projected their unwanted qualities onto others, blaming them for the very traits they could not accept in themselves. For instance, someone who denies their own selfishness may constantly accuse others of being selfish. Someone who hides their anger may see hostility everywhere, even when none exists. These projections are the shadow's way of making itself known. By pointing outward, it forces us to confront inward truths, but Jung also emphasized that the shadow is not purely negative. Yes, it contains our flaws, our repressed anger, jealousy, greed, and fear, but it also contains our untapped potential, our creativity, passion, and strength. Many people live small, limited lives not because they lack talent, but because the very qualities they need for growth are locked away in the shadow. The courage they need has been buried as aggression, the passion they long for has been dismissed as inappropriate, the independence they crave has been hidden under fear. This is why Jung insisted that confronting the shadow is essential for growth. To avoid it is to remain half a person, trapped by denial and unconscious influences. To face it, however, is to reclaim the hidden power within us and move toward wholeness. The discovery of the shadow, therefore, is not merely an intellectual idea but a turning point in the human journey, a call to courage, honesty, and the willingness to face what lies beneath the surface of our minds. At its core, the shadow represents all the aspects of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. These are not just the qualities society labels as bad, like anger, greed, envy, or lust, but also positive traits we have been taught to suppress, such as ambition, confidence, or vulnerability. From early childhood, we begin to learn what earns approval and what brings shame. A boy may be told, "Don't cry, be strong," so he buries his sensitivity. A girl may be told, "Don't be so loud," so she hides her voice. Over time, these rejections pile up and create a hidden personality inside us, a side we don't want to admit exists. This hidden personality is what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not evil by itself, but it can become destructive if left unacknowledged. When we deny a part of ourselves, it doesn't simply vanish, it gains power in the unconscious, influencing our actions in ways we do not understand. For example, the person who believes he is always calm may suddenly explode with rage at the smallest trigger. The individual who insists she is generous may secretly feel jealous when others succeed. These contradictions are the signs of the shadow breaking through. One of the most fascinating aspects of the shadow is projection. We often see in others the qualities we cannot accept in ourselves. A person who represses their own arrogance may find themselves constantly accusing others of being arrogant. This mechanism keeps us blind to our own flaws while distorting how we see the world. Jung's insight was that by studying what irritates us most in others, we can begin to discover the shadow within. Facing it requires honesty, courage, and the willingness to accept that we are far more complex than the image we present. The shadow is the reminder that we are not only who we think we are, but also who we refuse to be. If the shadow is the hidden side of the self, then the persona is the mask we wear to interact with the world. Jung described the persona as a kind of social role, the image we carefully construct to fit into society. For example, someone may wear the persona of the perfect student, the devoted parent, or the confident professional. On the surface, these roles help us function, they allow us to be accepted, respected, and understood. But beneath the persona lies the shadow, holding all the parts of ourselves that the mask tries to hide. The danger arises when we over-identify with our persona and forget that it is only a mask. When this happens, our life becomes performance rather than authenticity. Consider the person who always plays the role of the helper. They may seem endlessly kind, but inside, they could be struggling with resentment or exhaustion. Or think of the person who builds a persona of toughness, always appearing strong, but secretly fearing vulnerability and connection. The more we cling to the persona, the more pressure builds in the shadow. The conflict between what we show and what we hide creates inner tension, often leading to anxiety, depression, or burnout. Jung believed that true growth requires us to see through the mask, to recognize the persona for what it is, a necessary but incomplete expression of the self. Without this awareness, we risk living a life that pleases others but betrays ourselves. The persona is useful, but the danger lies in mistaking it for our true identity. The shadow does not remain buried forever. It finds ways to surface, often when we least expect it. One of the clearest signs of the shadow at work is through emotional triggers. When something or someone provokes an intense reaction in us, whether anger, jealousy, or fear, it is often because they reflect something hidden in ourselves. For example, if we are enraged by arrogance in others, it may be because we have not faced our own pride. Similarly, dreams often reveal the shadow through dark or frightening figures, monsters, demons, or threatening strangers, that symbolize the parts of ourselves we try to avoid. The shadow also appears in sudden lapses of control, a moment of rage, a careless betrayal, or a reckless decision that seems out of character. These moments are not accidents, they are the shadow breaking through the persona. On a collective level, entire societies project their shadow onto outsiders, scapegoating certain groups as the embodiment of evil or danger. This is why myths and stories across cultures often feature villains, monsters, or tricksters. They symbolize the shadow we all carry. But while the shadow can be destructive when ignored, it also carries hidden treasures. It is often the source of creativity, passion, and raw energy. Many artists, writers, and leaders have drawn their power from engaging with their darker side rather than denying it. The lesson is simple but profound: the more we suppress the shadow, the more it controls us. But when we bring it into the light of awareness, it becomes a source of transformation and growth. For Jung, the ultimate goal of human life was not simply success, pleasure, or comfort, but a process he called individuation. Individuation is the journey of becoming whole, of integrating the many parts of ourselves into a balanced and authentic self. At the heart of this journey lies the confrontation with the shadow. Why? Because as long as the shadow remains ignored, we live in fragments. We cling to the persona, deny what we dislike, and project our inner conflicts onto the outside world. Individuation begins when we dare to look within and acknowledge that we are more than the mask we wear. This does not mean indulging in every dark impulse or letting our destructive instincts rule us. It means recognizing them, understanding them, and finding a place for them within the larger harmony of the self. Jung compared the psyche to a circle, where the conscious ego is only a small point, and the self is the full, united whole. Individuation is the path from the small ego to the greater self, and the shadow is the doorway we must pass through. Without integration, the shadow works against us. With integration, it works for us, fueling our growth and creativity. The process is lifelong, demanding honesty, humility, and courage. Myths and spiritual traditions across history echo this truth. The hero must descend into darkness, face the monster, and return transformed. Individuation is that heroic journey, not in the outer world but within the depths of the soul. To ignore it is to remain incomplete, to embrace it is to live fully. While Jung's theories can sound abstract, shadow work is deeply practical. It begins with awareness, learning to notice when the shadow is speaking through our emotions, projections, and behaviors. One powerful practice is journaling. By writing about our thoughts and reactions, especially the ones we feel ashamed of, we begin to see patterns that reveal hidden parts of ourselves. Another method is dream analysis, since dreams often bring shadow material to the surface in symbolic form, whether as threatening figures, dark places, or strange encounters. Jung encouraged active imagination, a technique where you enter into dialogue with images from your unconscious, allowing them to speak and reveal their meaning. Mindfulness is also essential. By observing our triggers in real time, we can catch the shadow in action. For example, when someone irritates us beyond reason, we can pause and ask, "What does this reveal about me?" Shadow work also requires compassion. If we approach the shadow with harsh judgment, we drive it deeper underground. But if we listen with openness, we discover that what we rejected often contains energy we need. For instance, repressed anger may carry the strength to set boundaries. Denied vulnerability may hold the key to intimacy. Practical shadow work is not about erasing parts of ourselves, but about transforming them, turning destructive impulses into creative energy, and reclaiming the fullness of who we are. It is not easy, but every honest step brings us closer to authenticity. The shadow is not only personal, it is also collective. Jung observed that just as individuals have shadows, so do groups, cultures, and entire civilizations. When a society denies certain truths about itself, those truths resurface in destructive ways. History is filled with examples of nations projecting their shadow onto outsiders, scapegoating minorities, labeling enemies as evil, or dehumanizing those who are different. Wars, oppression, and prejudice often begin with collective shadow projection. On an archetypal level, every role carries its own hidden danger. The hero can become arrogant and destructive. The caregiver can fall into self-sacrifice and resentment. The ruler can transform into a tyrant. These are the shadows of archetypes, unconscious distortions of otherwise noble roles. Recognizing them is vital because it prevents us from blindly repeating destructive patterns. We also see the collective shadow in myths, religions, and stories. Monsters, demons, and villains represent not just external threats but the darkness we fear within ourselves. By projecting it outward, societies avoid responsibility but also miss the chance for growth. The modern world still struggles with its shadow. Consumerism hides emptiness, technology hides loneliness, politics hides corruption. Jung believed that unless individuals confront their shadows, societies will remain trapped in cycles of projection and violence. Facing the collective shadow requires courage, dialogue, and the willingness to see in the enemy the reflection of our own denied traits. Only then can communities move beyond blame and toward integration. In this way, the work of the individual becomes inseparable from the healing of society itself. The ultimate purpose of confronting the shadow is not to destroy it, but to transform it. Jung emphasized that the shadow is not our enemy, it is our hidden teacher. It contains the raw material we need to become whole. When we deny it, we live divided, pretending to be good while secretly haunted by impulses we refuse to face. But when we accept the shadow, we open the door to authenticity, balance, and inner freedom. Transformation begins the moment we stop running from ourselves. Instead of fearing anger, we ask what message it holds, perhaps the need to defend our boundaries. Instead of burying jealousy, we recognize it as a sign of our unfulfilled desires. Instead of hiding fear, we use it as a compass pointing to the places where growth is needed. Each time we reclaim a piece of the shadow, we reclaim a piece of our power. This process is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. Myths capture this truth: the hero who enters the underworld, battles the dragon, and emerges with treasure is a symbol of shadow integration. The treasure is not gold, it is the rediscovered strength, creativity, and freedom of the self. On a spiritual level, the shadow reminds us that light cannot exist without darkness. We grow not by erasing our flaws but by weaving them into the fabric of who we are. Transformation is not easy. It requires honesty, patience, and the courage to face discomfort. But the reward is profound, a life lived with integrity, where our choices are not dictated by denial or fear, but by conscious awareness. Jung's message was clear: when you dare to face your shadow, you don't just uncover darkness, you awaken hidden light. The shadow is the path to wholeness, and transformation is the journey of becoming fully human.